Forgot to do the intro. Welcome back to another episode of Project Peppy. It's your boy, the Grumpy Penguin, aka J-Dog, aka... no one calls me J-Dog. So we've already removed the headlight housing assemblies from the car. The chrome rings just snap on. It's kind of a French car thing from what I understand. They're pretty easy to take apart. And then we removed the old seal beam housings. These are the new seal beam housings. They're actually conversions for H4 bulb type. So you can see in the back versus the kind of original all seal beam where you just plug it straight in. This one will actually take a bulb. We'll talk about the bulbs we're using in just a minute, but first things first, we've got to go ahead and get it reassembled. I've taken a little bit of time and kind of buffed and cleaned this stuff up. It is original parts, but they actually cleaned up pretty nicely, so overall pretty happy with that. The nice thing with these H4 conversion housings is they do fit really well, and they work really nicely actually. I've got them on another one of my classic cars, and I'm very happy with the way they work. So we'll get these put back together here and get them on the car. All right, we've gone ahead and removed the original or remanufactured harness from the car. I don't think this is original because all the wires are green. They did put color coding ends on them, but still that's not overly helpful because the color coded ends on the other end don't match. So what we're gonna do is again, use the Deutsch connectors to create like a keyed harness. This can only plug in one way, unlike the bullet connectors that corrode and do all kinds of other bad things. They can also be plugged in random orders and cause shorts and problems and everything like that. So I'm not actually gonna take this harness apart. I'm just gonna go ahead and build a new one. We've got properly colored wire per the original wiring diagram. So what we're going to do is just basically use this as a pattern and rebuild a whole new harness or sub harness for this. And then we're going to put new headlight plugs in and get rid of all this old crusty stuff and janky half ripped apart wires. So here we go. Utilizing some pinstriping tape, I'm going to go ahead and mark each wire from the original harness that we're going to be cutting off. This is kind of obviously important so that we get our harness pin connector correct and so that all our electronics still work. And the wires are very, very dodgy. We did a little bit of a clip before, I think, or I'll show you a clip of the wires that they're very, very damaged. Broken in several places, so obviously probably not working the best. So now I just go ahead and what I usually do is I'll take a colored marker for the wires in question and go ahead and mark each one accordingly before I snip them off. That way I know which one is which, since they're all black on this side of the harness.
15 minutes later.
Uh-oh, you're wondering, why is he sitting in the car with a can of Red Bull, a bunch of tools, and instructions on how to take the dashboard apart? I thought we were working on lighting. Well, we were, but the wiring harness is totally and completely jacked. So now we get to take apart the dashboard to access the parts of the wiring harness that have dead shorted internally, repair those sections to make the new sub harness for the new headlights. So maybe someday we can have an operable car again. I'm just glad this didn't lead to an electrical fire because it very easily could have. So cheers, this is going to be a longer video than we planned. Probably multiple parts as we're getting into the electrical harness. I'm going to shut the main camera off, but I'll take you with me with a little GoPro in the back, probably put you on a time lapse if you really want to watch me take a dashboard out of a 50-year-old French car. Here we go. This is obviously our main wiring harness here. So this is pretty much roasted. If you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen the photos. The insulation has completely broken down. There's been some internal shorting. We're down to a couple of strands on some of the wires. Honestly, I'm not sure how the car didn't catch fire before this, but I'm glad it didn't, seeing as how I've only owned it for a month. Speaking of, 1 month in was not my plan to take this all the way apart to this level. The inside of the car is a complete disaster. It will go back together. It's just nuts and bolts. It's not that difficult. Actually, to whoever the engineers were on this project as French, it comes apart really well. And it's pretty easy. The fasteners are all very consistent. It's actually a really easy car to work on. So I'm like super happy about that. But there is just a lot of wires that need repaired. Pretty much everything under the hood was completely just jacked. They added some coil systems, so we've got positive coils with no insulation on the wire. We've got, bare wires hanging out, stuff about ready to break in half, random amounts of surgical tape. I was told by my wife that this is actually black surgical tape, so congratulations on whoever did that. That's about the dodgiest fix I've ever friggin' seen. It also gives us an opportunity to get into things like the gauge cluster, the main gauge cluster here. Starting to think this might have been apart before, only because it's coming apart pretty well. The car does reportedly have only 34,000 miles, so that could be some of it as well. But yeah, this actually looks pretty good. I think a lot of, I'm not sure the dash has been out before. When I did take that out, it looked pretty unmolested. And judging by the quality of some of the rest of the work on the car, I don't think it was, just simply because the connectors were all there. Like every bolt had a lock washer and a regular washer, and I just don't see that attention to detail in the rest of the build, so. Cool. So now you can see, that's so cool. Get that cleaned up a little bit. Get this plastic cleaned up a little bit. Let me see if I can get this a little closer to the camera. Focus. So we're looking at this cluster here, and you can see there's just some dirt that's back here. This can all be polished out. It's actually in pretty good shape. So we'll finish taking this apart, we'll get it detailed, and we'll put it back in the car. Another good thing to do, as we have this apart, is to just go ahead and check the resistance on like the fuel gauge and the temperature gauge. There are specs if you have the original OEM factory service manual. They will tell you the tolerances that has to be within, and a semi-cheap multimeter will be able to do that. I've got a little bit more expensive unit because I prefer to have just some quality tools when it comes to things like electronics, but even your cheapo AutoZone brand type multimeter will be able to do it. So that's another thing we'll probably just go ahead and check real quick, is the resistance, to make sure all that's good, and then we'll hop on the old computer and get some things on order. So very productive day. Stick with us. We'll get into this cleaning everything up in another episode. I'm not going to bore you guys with the details of me cutting one wire at a time out of the loom and putting it back in. I don't think that's something you really need to see. Repair work is pretty easy. It's just very boring. So stay tuned for another video. We'll be back at you here soon on the Grumpy Penguin. Thanks for watching.